And hello, everyone. Haha. Starting off a bit earlier today. Yep, a little bit earlier. Um, Starting with some tier lists as well. I promised I'd do it. So here we are. We're going to go through. Excuse me. My throat's a little bit dry today, so I'll try to keep the coughing to a minimum. I have plenty of fluids, so hopefully it shan't be too much of a problem. But we'll see how we go. But yeah, we're going to start off with some tier lists today. Um, Only need to do the three. These are basically going to be updates to my previous tier lists that I've done already, taking into consideration um, my experience since then with various vehicles, and also adding in the new vehicles and any position changes from my previous tier lists. So what I've done. Hey, babe, how's the eye doing? Um, I know it's yes, early indeed, babe. Much earlier. So Natalie was supposed to actually go to a wedding reception today, but she woke up and her eye was not too great, so she opted not to go. So yeah, that's a shame. So send her some love because she's not feeling too great today, but she's doing better. Getting better. Ooh, yeah, definitely something on the old throat there. I've just been feeling slightly under the weather for the last 2 weeks. It's just, the cold weather comes in, I instantly start feeling like I've got a cold. That's just me in winter. Delightful. Delightful, I say. But yeah, so we're going to do scouts, off road, and heavy trucks. The heavy duty and the highway trucks are basically the same. My opinions on those have not changed. They are what they are, more or less useless in a majority of cases. There's a few that are kind of a bit better to use and everything, but as soon as you get access to better trucks, you're moving away from those anyway. So we won't be touching those. They're just kind of um, what they were previously. But the three categories that I have mentioned here, scouts, off-road, and heavies, um, there have been a few vehicle changes, and also there have been um, some new trucks added. So we're going to go through things. I'm going to do adjustments first, and then I'm going to talk about the new ones. So we have our three tier lists here. There we go. These for the three classes that we're going to be looking at. I've populated them as I had in the last video for them. So the separate video that deals specifically with these classes, this is how the tier list ended up for them, given my experiences and thoughts on the vehicles. So there's been a few changes, mostly in the Scout class, but I think a few vehicles have jumped in the other ones as well, either up or down, depending on my usage of them. And then obviously we've got some new ones, like we've got the two new scouts here from phase 11. We're going to add those in at the end. So that's where we are right now. So change number 1 to the scout list. The good old Wrangler. If you have been on my streams at all, you will know that I have been using this vehicle quite a lot recently. It's honestly one of the only times that I've ever felt really comfortable with a small scout. Most of the small scouts are either underpowered, just unresponsive, or just useless. Just the 4x4 scouts are generally, on the whole, not the best vehicles in the game, with a few exceptions. The Wrangler is one of them. This honestly is the best 4x4 in the game. It really is. It's the best 4x4 scout in the game, or best 4x4 small scout because the Ford is also a 4x4, I should say. But that's slightly different because that's almost like a truck as opposed to a scout. Hey, Turtle, nice to see you. Thanks for dropping by. We're just going through some updates to our tier list at the moment. And then we'll be jumping into SnowRunner. But yeah, so the Wrangler is actually jumping up to the S category. I started using this in Ontario. I scouted no, not Ontario, British Columbia. I scouted the entirety of British Columbia with this thing. Never had a problem. Never got stuck. Pretty much never fell over. Um, and I've pretty much done the same thing for the new region, Scandinavia. I pretty much scouted most of Scandinavia with this thing, with a bit of it being done with the Burlak, but most of it has been scouted with this, and it is honestly so much fun. It is such a fun vehicle. So it's moving up to S class. It's if you want a small, fun to drive, just beautiful scout. Just to do scouting. It doesn't do much else. It doesn't really have the engine power to pull trailers. I was pulling a fuel trailer with it at one point on British Columbia, but it's not really got the power for pulling trailers unless it's on kind of flat highway kind of ground or just rough trails. In that case, it does a good job. But if it's up and down hills through mud and stuff, you don't really want to be pulling a trailer with it. It's not got the power for it. But then again, not many of the small scouts do. In fact, I don't think any of the small scouts actually have sufficient power to be pulling trailers. But the crawler suspension is where this thing shines. You put that on it, and unless I have been literally trying to flip it, like openly putting it into scenarios to try and flip the thing, it's not fallen over. It's just gone through everything. It's gone over rocks. It's climbed near sheer vertical cliffs. It's literally just a goat. It's a mountain goat. It's brilliant. I would definitely recommend, if you have the DLC for this, I would definitely recommend using it. It's moving up to S class. Right, there was another change. What was the other change I wanted to make? I was thinking of moving the other 4x4s down to the C class to join their brethren, but I they're kind of hard to quantify. The small scouts are just not that great. And I suppose keeping them separated like this does kind of highlight which ones of those are better. So we'll leave it. We'll leave it. Like the Gore, the Loaf, and the Tuz 166. I was thinking of moving them to C, just to be with their brethren. But I'll leave them where they are because these ones are actually slightly better than these ones, I would say. However, the Marshall, maybe I should move the Marshall up. I think last time I was saying that the Marshall was hampered by its fuel tank, but it's still good, So I'm going to move the Marshall up to a B because the Marshall deserves some recognition for being a very good scout. It's a lot more stable than most of the other 4x4s. It's got really good tyres as standard. It's just hampered by its fuel. It's got a very small fuel tank. So if you can manage that, it does well. So I'm going to move it up. I'm going to be generous to it now. I was a little bit harsh on it last time, I think, but I'll move it up to a B class because it's certainly better than these ones. These here are not great. Anyway, speaking of 4x4s, let's have a look at the Neo. Now, I was testing this out. I remember saying in a previous stream, I think it was last week, that I was surprised by its power to weight ratio. It's got a very low power to weight ratio, but it actually drives pretty well. I've been doing a little bit of testing with it. off cam, and I honestly think it deserves a place in the B category with these other 4x4s. It's despite its power to weight, it actually pulls really well, and it's a good kind of alternative vehicle. I mean, you get it for free, so that's a bonus. If you go to Scandinavia, you can literally just find this thing in a swamp, tow it out, and it's yours. Boom. Don't have to buy it. There's only one upgrade for it, which is the suspension, which it doesn't really need. It's not got the biggest tires, but none of the small scouts do, to be honest. But it's certainly a lot more stable than these scouts down here. So yeah, I want to put it in the B. I want to give it a B category. It's not bad. It's not bad. Use it if you like, but I honestly wouldn't really. I still wouldn't recommend anything below B, like B tier and below. I wouldn't say you should definitely get this scout. It's amazing. I would say look at these ones if you want. If you want a good scout, look at the S and the A tier. The rest of them are a bit lackluster. It's just the B class. The B tier ones are better than these ones. That's basically um, the long and the short of that, I would say. Now, the Burlak. The Burlak infuriates me because I want to love it more than I do. That's not to say that it's bad. It's not to say that it's incapable of doing things. What you have to be with the Burlak is careful. It's kind of at times it makes me feel like I'm driving a Scout 800. You know, it's it it it's got a dual personality, and 95% of the time its primary personality is there front and center, and you will have no problems with it. And then occasionally it turns evil, and when it turns evil, it's a pain. um, it's a great vehicle. It can have a crane if you want, but the crane is pretty terrible, so I wouldn't. It just adds weight. It's the only Scout that can tow Scout or regular trailers, depending on the hitch that you install. It's the first Scout that's got the first vehicle in the game that has a variable hitch point, which is great. I hope we get more vehicles like that in the future because I tell you, I would love a variable hitch point for the Ford F750 so it could tow Scout trailers. That would make it brilliant because it would become the ultimate Scout trailer puller in that particular case, But hey ho, we've only got the Burlak for now, but it's very good for that. Its cabin add-on adds loads of fuel, loads of repair points. The tires are simply incredible, probably some of the best tires in the game. They're huge, they're magnificent in mud, and they're studded, so you don't even need chains. And it'll perform just as well on ice as it will in mud. It's amazing. It can tackle terrain like no other Scout can. It really can. Just plows through things. But there's an issue. It's 20 foot tall and thin as a rake, which makes it prone to falling over. It's very thin. It's a very thin wheelbase, and it's very tall. If you tip this thing over, that's when its evil side comes out, because all of the winch points are right down at the bottom of the vehicle, right along the wheel arches, basically. So if you are trying to turn this thing over, and it's happened to me a few times on stream, it's a 20-minute ordeal of trying to flip this thing back over. And if you don't have winch points, good luck. I mean, it can have an autonomous winch, which is good because it's a scout vehicle, but it means that it's not suitable for the severest of terrains. It's kind of like the direct opposite of the Wrangler. The Wrangler can go anywhere, like on any kind of surface, and it will not fall over. You put the Burlak on the wrong type of terrain, it will fall over immediately, and you will have a lot of trouble getting it back on its wheels. Uh, Even so, I'm honestly still going to put it in the S rank. Because if you're a careful driver and um, you don't, if you're not silly with it, it will serve you beautifully, and it will literally go anywhere and do anything for you. But there will be those occasions where it will fall over and you will rage. That's just how this thing rolls, literally. That's just how it rolls. Um, Still going into S class though. It's great if you're not silly with it. Yeah. That's about right, babe. That's about right. Um, yeah, it's a serious contender to the Tatterin. You know, its terrain ability, its terrain tackling ability is way better than the Tatterin because the Tatterin struggles on ice, and the Tatterin actually has smaller tires, basically, which is quite impressive. I didn't ever think that I would see a scout that would best the Tatterin. Um, but the Tatterin does have the advantage of being the exact opposite of the Burlak, and that is it's very wide but very squat, which means that you have to work to flip that thing over. Um, you have to really throw it into some serious situations in order to roll the Tatterin. Um, so it's better at tackling like it's better at tackling severe terrain than compared to the Burlak. To the prototype trailer, well, that is a good point as well, Turtle. Yes, the Burlak with the Scout hitch is one of the best Scout, well, probably is the best Scout trailer hauler in the game. Um, its power and tires make it just pull those trailers with no problem at all. It's really good. It really is good. You know, I'm not trying to say that the Burlak is bad. I'm just saying you got to be careful sometimes because if you roll this thing, um, you're going to have trouble getting it back on its wheels again. You really do. Anyway, I think that wraps up the updates for the scouts. Yeah, I think that thereabout does it. Yeah, that looks good. So let's move on to the off-road class. Now, again, a couple of changes to talk about. First of all, the Voron Grad is going up to S tier, and the Voron AE is coming down to A tier. I found that the Grad has pulled ahead. It's mostly due to its fuel tank being bigger and both all-wheel drive and diff lock being switchable, which allows you to turn them off and save a little bit of fuel, compared to the other two, where the options are always on, I believe. I believe one is always on and the other one has switchable diff lock, but always on all-wheel drive. I think. The changes between the Vorons are very subtle. I think that's what it was. But currently preferring the Grad over the D or the AE. So we'll swap those around. Um, But yeah, they're still great. They're still good vehicles, you know. Just I think the Voron just the Grad just beats them out over its two cousins. Yeah, yeah. Not much in it. Not much in it though. Very little in it between these three. Another change I want to make is I want to take the Zeeks here. Um, I hadn't had much time to test this thing when I first did this tier list. This was kind of like just I did my last tier list I think just after Phase 9 had launched. So I kind of used this thing on a New Game Plus file to test it out a little bit, and it seemed okay. And then I came to use it on my actual streams, and I quickly actually started to hate it. Um, it's just underpowered. It's very, very underpowered, and really weird with its kind of its responsiveness. Its acceleration seems really dull, and it just seems to waddle all over the place. It's like its suspension is too soft. It just kind of wallows back and forth as you're driving it along. So I'm actually going to put this thing down to C tier. Um, this is quite a considerable drop for it. But I just don't like it that much. I mean, it's not as bad as these here, which are utterly terrible. Um, but when I looked at the other vehicles here, it kind of has some problems that I could associate with some of these other vehicles, and it's also just not very versatile. It doesn't have a lot of options. It doesn't have a lot of things that it can do. One second, guys. Like I say, it seems that winter comes around, and the first thing that happens is I suffer from a perpetual cold. So, great fun. Right. But yeah, it's just not that great. Just not that great. That's what I would say. A truck that did improve in my view though is the Bandit, which I'm putting up to A tier. It's its worst feature is its fuel. Not its fuel consumption, but just its fuel capacity. It has a very small tank, and whilst it does have a roof rack, the roof rack doesn't actually fill the tank once it's empty. So it's not got a great deal of range. But it's very good at towing trailers. Um, you stick a saddle on this thing, and it will just blast through the landscape. It kind of solves its stability because it can wobble a little bit, even with the Tega tires, which are definitely the tires to use for this thing. Don't use the other tires. It's like driving a unicycle. Um, but with the Tega tires on, it can still wobble a little bit, and it will still roll. So I do recommend using it with a saddle and a trailer as opposed to a flatbed. But its performance has, in recent expansions, has led me to reevaluate its place on the list. So it's moving on up. Moving on up. And did I want to change anything else? I don't think so. Which one there? You put the Azov in D. Which Azov? Oh, the sprinter. It's basically there because it's too big to be a scout, and as an off-road truck, it doesn't have any capacity to do stuff. It can't tow trailers. Its internal fuel supply is terrible. Um, yes, it's fast, but its utility and its ability to do anything is practically zero. And I would rather use a scout vehicle to do scouting than I would the Azov. So that's why it's ended up in D tier, Turtle. Yeah, that's why this thing is down here because it's it's kind of pointless. But the ice on cola is fun. If you want to mess around with it, that is perfectly fine. If you want to slide around on the ice, yes, I can imagine this actually being quite a fun vehicle to use. But um, from my perspective, trucks should have utility. They should have the ability to do things. And the more things they can do, the more useful they are. And the Azov does nothing. So it may be fun to drive, but it doesn't do anything whilst doing it. Yeah. As a working truck, it isn't good. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what these tier lists are based on. They're based on the usefulness of the truck to do as many things as possible, whilst also doing it well. So yeah, that's why it's down here. But yeah, I can totally appreciate what you say there about this thing, with its speed and its um, control. It would be a lot of fun swinging it around on the ice. Puts on a good dance performance, shall we say. Now then, the Mac. I'm so glad I'm doing this after they changed its collision model, because after I used this thing in British Columbia, I was ready to put it in E class. It was awful. It was quite possibly one of the worst driving experiences I'd ever had with any truck. Um, it was so bad. It just you just couldn't drive it. It got stuck on a rock on a road. It would beach itself on a rock. it just it was so bad, and it just didn't seem to perform in any kind of way. Since then, it's had a severe glow up. They've actually fixed the terrain, the axle model for it, so that the terrain doesn't collide as much. Um, and because of that, it's not pulling the subframe through the mud all the time, so its actual pulling power has increased because it's not having to pull itself through the mud as well as the cargo that you're towing. And it also means that it doesn't get stuck on any as much. So the Mac is actually going straight up into A tier. Uh, I can't say it's as good as these. The Azov 6 is the good old dependable that will do anything. It may take it 6 years to do it, but it'll do anything. It will get you there perfectly fine. The two Tagers, absolutely amazing off-roaders, fast, responsive, powerful, great tires, just do not stop for nothing. And the Vorongrad, pretty much the same. Really good tires, fantastic speed, probably more speed than the Tagers, I would say. Good stability, good terrain. Um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? But ability to, you know, cross terrain and do things, to tackle anything that it comes up against. The Mac does have its foibles. It does have its foibles still. It's not perfect, but it's just as good as these other trucks here in terms of its overall performance. Um, and yeah, it's just really fun to drive. It's really fun to drive now, and I am enjoying using it on Scandinavia, um, and will continue to be using it today, actually. So that's the updated off-road truck tier list. Um, yeah, I think that about covers it. Again, S and A tier trucks, you want to try and use as much as you can if you have them. They're brilliant. They'll serve you well. B tier trucks, use them if you have to. If you don't have anything else, they'll serve you well, but they have their problems. And anything below here, I would probably not use. C class is really kind of scraping the barrel, and D classes don't even bother. D for don't. D for no. So that's the off-road trucks. Let's move ourselves onto our last tier list. Here we go. Here we are. So the heavy trucks. I don't think I have any adjustments to make for this tier list at the moment. Pretty much everything is where it should be, I think. I was considering the Dan and the Derry. I was considering whether they should be moving in either direction. I've been using the Dan recently. Um, it has just acquired the multi-purpose add-on, which means that it can finally equip a crane, which is a long time coming. So it finally has a crane now, which is good, or the option for a crane. And with it comes a nice supply of fuel, repair parts, and one cargo slot, which is always good. But the mud in Scandinavia has been causing it problems. It does not take deep mud as well as some of the other trucks. The tyres that it has access to are not the best tyres. They're kind of a middle of the road mud tyre, which does kind of limit it slightly in deeper conditions. But if you've got a winch point, you can still get through it okay. So, I mean, I was thinking of moving it down to a B, but it's still got some good utility behind it and it's still got some good ability. You just want to be careful where you take it. So, I decided to leave that in A. And likewise, the Derry, Derry Special, that the A placing was kind of based on my experiences that I'd had with it in Ontario only. Just after it came out. Like I said, I did these tier lists not long after Phase 9 came out. And yeah, it's a solid A truck. I don't think it could push into the S category. It's not quite got the grunt behind it, shall we say. 1 second again, guys. The end of my nose is just constantly tickling. It's like, just, will you stop? Will you stop it already? I'm trying to do talking. So yeah, I'll deal with that as best I can. But yeah, so the Derry is staying where it is in the A class. Doesn't quite have the kind of ability to match the S trucks at the moment, but it's still a good vehicle. Still a good vehicle. I certainly couldn't justify moving it down. Nervous tick. Yeah, that as well, babe. That as well. But yeah, so that's going to stay as it is. The tier list is going to stay as it is for now. But we do have 2 news to add in. We have the Mastodon and we have the Kenworth. And these things are interesting. So we'll talk about the Mastodon first. It's kind of like a side grade to the King. You know, the Zeeks in the S class there. What is it? The 566 is it 566? I can't remember. So many numbers and letters in these trucks' names that I literally can't remember which one's which sometimes. But this guy here, kind of been the undisputed king of SnowRunner since it came out in Amore. It's the, you want to get to this place, you can take this truck, it will get you there. It does not matter what you find in between, it will get you there. And it will do it whilst towing a trailer and hauling cargo for you. So it's kind of been the automatic go-to. And when the Mastodon came out, there was a lot of talk about it knocking the King off the top spot. There was a lot of comparison between the two. I feel that is justified. It is a kind of very similar machine. The Mastodon feels a little bit bigger, a little bit clunkier almost. sometimes, but it still has a good amount of power behind it. It can equip the new multi-purpose add-on, um, which is nice. And if you don't give it that, it can take a two-slot trailer, two-slot sideboard bed, and have a rear-mounted crane, which is actually a really useful thing sometimes, especially if you're pulling like a flatbed behind it, because you can easily load onto the flatbed. Whereas other trucks struggle because the crane tends to be cab mounted next to the cab, and you kind of have to unhook the trailer and pull alongside and transfer over and then redo it and everything. With the Mastodon, you don't have that. You can literally just load and go because of where the crane is positioned. So those are plus points for it. I don't feel like it has the same capacity as the Zeeks, as the King. I don't feel it has quite the same terrain conquering ability. Um, it's it struggles just a little bit in some situations that the Zeeks just that the King just kind of rides on through. So for that reason, I've decided to put it into A class with the rest of these. Doesn't quite get to the standard of these. Um, it's very close though, very very close. I've been thinking for a long time now whether I could justify putting it into S class. I kind of wanted to put it into S class because I do like the Mastodon a lot, but it's certainly more versatile than the King. It's got a lot more add-on options. Um, can do an awful lot more in terms of its ability, but it just doesn't have the same kind of terrain conquering ability as the King. So we're going to pop that into A class for now. Maybe time will change my opinion, like it has for some other trucks. Who knows? Now then, the last one, the Kenworth. Again, a truck that I really wanted to like a lot, and there's a lot of good with the Kenworth, but at the same time, there's one major glaring downside to the Kenworth that, excuse me, um, that kind of stops it from going into S class, and that is its pulling power. On the flat, on the downhill, or on the slight slope, it's fine. You come up against any kind of like actual gradient. Like I'm not talking like little kind of shimmies in the road or little kind of just bumps and things like that. No, I'm talking about you start trying to climb a hill with this thing and it just stops. It's just like, nope, I'm not going up that hill. I refuse. And you've got to do a lot of gear shifting. You've got to utilize your low gears quite a lot. And even then, if you've got a heavy load, you will be trundling along in low or low minus for the entirety of the climb. And that's if you don't just come to a crawling stop. It's its hauling power on a slope is terrible. It just does not seem to have the ability to climb hills when it's loaded. Even when it's not loaded, it struggles with hills. So yeah. But that being said, it's massive. It's got huge tires. It can conquer mud like an absolute trooper. Um, and it's one of the most versatile trucks in terms of its add-ons ever. And it just got a new one recently. It got its oil rig flatbed, which is only a two-slot tray, only a two-slot, but it has like fuel and repair parts and loads of other stuff with it as well. So yeah, that too is going into A because, like I said, I can't justify it in the S class. It just does not have the same it does not have the same pulling power. But it's a darn fine truck otherwise, you know. Mm. It's not bad. It's not bad at all, and I would certainly use it, you know, um, as I would any other A rank truck here. I'd use any of these quite happily to do any job. Um, Over any of these. Some of these B class trucks are fun. I've been having a lot of fun with the twin steer, for example, recently, but it's still a one trick pony. Um, as are quite a lot of these other trucks here. I'm not saying that these ones are bad necessarily, but a lot of them can't do an awful lot, which is why they've been kind of shunted to B class. 1 second again, guys. Ah, sorry about that. But yeah, still a good truck. Still great. You use the kennel a lot, turtle? Aye, aye. It's definitely a good truck. It's definitely a good truck. You just don't want to. You want to try and avoid hills with it. That's what I would say. And then it kind of does its job quite nicely. If you're just kind of like swamp driving, you know, absolutely great. But yeah, avoid those hills. It doesn't like them. So, with that, I think that wraps up the tier lists for the time being.